Hey, welcome to Talking in Stations. I am Matterall, here with a familiar face for all of you. This is Hateless. You guys are probably just watching him a minute ago. Here with a familiar face. Also, we have Ashterothi here.
Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashterothi. How are you guys doing?
Really good. Let me make sure that everything is set. We also have Gregorian with us.
Hello.
And our guest and one of our Patreons, Nick Bison. How you doing, Nick?
Good day. Thanks for having me back in.
Before we jump into it, I want to apologize. I'm cloaked today once again, but I'll get in front of the camera again soon with that sweater.
That's all right.
Well, it's past the winter, so maybe not. We may have to wait again.
Yeah, your Christmas sweater. All right. Okay, today we're going to talk about, well, a great number of things from... Actually, there's not a lot of news, is there? We're going to do...
It's kind of been quiet. It is worth noting we didn't have a show yesterday, but yesterday was the Quantum Core Day. So we've been building up to this for almost 6 months now, I think, between the first announcement that quantum cores were coming to yesterday. But now, not only do all new structures require a quantum core, but any structure that does not have a quantum core, that structure will no longer provide tethering, repair, or refitting. So, in particular, wormholers, if they were not taken care of by yesterday, they're in a bit of a lurch at the moment.
Right.
I did have one question on that with the cores.
Oh yeah.
Where I know it doesn't, a core-less structure won't give you repair. Does that include that automatic repair your shields for docking and undocking?
We talked about capacitor and shields. I think are related to capacitor, and we didn't know. It was assumed that there would be a problem restoring your capacitor, because
right. I don't think that they would go through all of that technical effort to just preserve that for no reason, and so I think it would just behave the same way that it behaves anytime that your ship transitions between something. Which I guess for shields, you're right, because you can jump through like a Stargate. I don't know.
Well,
that might be worth sciencing.
There was something that Kenneth Feld was telling us yesterday, and that was that the way that it queues, like there's certain queues of things that happen when you dock in one of those structures, and part of that is that it refills your capacitor. I imagine another part of that is it refills your shields, and then it does these other things that are, I think, known as basic services for the Citadel. That you don't have.
It would definitely be worth testing.
Yeah,
that's for sure. And
we suppose that because you don't have basic services, you don't have a fitting, you don't have a repair, that it never goes through the queue of processes that belongs to. So you might have other services like a market or mineral something or other, but you won't have those basic services. So we'd have to test it.
Right. Yeah. So just to be clear, so service modules, things like the market, the refinery, the laboratory, those can all be online and still run. And the structure can even, I believe, is still fully functional, high powered. The guns work and everything. It, as you said, it is those basic services that actually stop working. You can still dock and undock and get your stuff out, but you lose the protection and repair of tether and the ability to refit and rearm and repair inside.
Yeah.
This is very similar to kind of what you see in the philosophy of Poshvin, because people that have bad standings with the Triglavians cannot use those repair services in those structures, and eventually they can't even dock in the station, the NPC stations. But those with good standings, i.e. the locals, can use those services to continually repair themselves, giving a home field, just part of the edge that is the home field advantage of the locals.
Yeah. What's interesting too is because I thought, oh, well, if you don't have a core in there, then you probably would lose jump clone But that's a service that you put in there
Nope,
using
that's a service module.
Yeah.
Yep, that works just the same. Another big one that a lot of people thought about was there's all these Athenors that were already put up, and many of them, they didn't have cores. They were kind of like, because the moon changes to HiSec happened, I think, just prior to this the core changes. So kind of everybody had these Athenors that they put up but no longer care about. So they're definitely not going to core it, and they probably either don't care enough to put fuel in it and is just burning through fuel and just not going into low power yet, or they care just enough to keep it fueled in one service module running just to hold on to it. But the key here is that if you have an Athenor, you can still use the drill. And so you can do basically the entire functionality of an Athenor that you need from it, even if it never has a core. So the question is, how many of these Athenors in HiSec exist? Because really, I mean, at this point, most structures are probably cored. So really boils down to maybe some of these HiSec or maybe even wormhole structures, places where people would have put up Athenors and then no longer want them because of the period of restriction or whatever with less. And now if they somehow become valuable again, those structures will exist, but they still won't have cores.
Yeah, I know that my alliance's
What is your alliance?
Pandemic Horde industry and logistics people have, the people who run alliance level logistics like structures and stuff like that, have decided not to core everything yet.
That's Gregorian speaking.
And they've marked which structures aren't going to be cored, because I was surprised when I saw at how much you could still do with an uncored grandfathered structure.
Yeah, essentially, they're taking away your combat capability with a structure if it doesn't have a core. And so it's kind of saying, if you want to use this thing to harass areas like these roach motels that, people used to just drop 5, 6, 7 of them, and that's what they were going to base themselves out of, and not really even, fuel them for very long. But they were too hard to remove. So what this is for, what these cores are for, is to say, okay, you can put down as many structures as you want, but you're going to pay for it by putting down this thing that is incentive for somebody else to destroy your structure. And so they get that core, they get to keep it if they destroy your structure. So now if you're going to throw down 3 or 4 or 5 Astra houses, not only are they going to cost more because you have to buy the Astra house and now you have to buy the core as well, which are kind of expensive, but now you're putting something up on the table as table stakes to say, I mean it, I want to use these, for combat. And that's primarily what this was about. But it's also to control spam because there's too many structures out there. I think also they really wanted to take the need to have structures in HiSec. I think they wanted to take that and recalculate that. So maybe the better idea is for you not to have your own structures in HiSec, since that's where a lot of spam was, I guess.
Well, it's important to note that this isn't the design. The design of cores isn't based on what functionality is given to structures without cores, because from now on there will be no new structures without cores. That's the other piece of this whole puzzle. So really, all this is a soft grace period that some structures, these stations, or whatever, the upwell structures will become an ever dwindling population of grandfathered in structures, these coreless structures, and then otherwise it'll basically become a forgotten or quirky side mechanic.
There was this other thing too that somebody told me from Goonswarm, where they said like, oh yeah, there's still a bunch of Astra houses in the north, so anytime I'm roaming in the north, I can just pull over into a pit stop on one of those green to them, or blue to them Astra houses and refuel your capacitor, your tether, and everything else. And it's just it's like a little lily pad for you that's safe when you're out there. And those things could be there forever. Essentially, they're just sitting there. I don't know.
Right.
Hateless.
Two things I want to note about. Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead, and then I'll go to Hateless. Go ahead.
Just 2 mechanics about this that I think is important to note because I don't know if a lot of people are that aware of it. First of all, unanchoring structures is a giant pain in the butt, not just logistically having to move it around, but the fact that you have to initiate an event that has a timer that ticks down. And when that timer is over, that structure suddenly becomes just a can that can be looted. And so even with everything else going on, you also can just, as we noted during the war, have your keep star stolen. Oopsie daisy. So,
Or smaller structure.
right. So it's like,
Oh
it's
my
almost more of a risk to try to tear down your structure sometimes than it is to just let it stay alive and be done with it. The other thing to note is that these structures, once cored, the core drops when the structure dies, which means if once a region becomes populated and somebody puts up new structures, eventually, like as time goes on, structures will be put up. Those will require cores, and then when those structures are destroyed by the invading forces, if they're not handed over, those cores will drop, and then the invading forces will then just load those cores into their new structures.
Yeah. All right. So, Hateless, do you deal with this kind of stuff at all? Do structures, cores, this mean anything to your gameplay?
No, not really. I know that the people that run in nullsec are very dependent on these, but they have the money to just throw the ISK at it. It's not a problem.
Mm-hmm. But for you, that does a lot of missions and other
And
stuff.
ISEC, it's not a big deal. Rather than tethers and Sedox are more reliable. You don't have to worry about if something ran out of fuel. I try and keep clones in actual NPC stations because if they run out of fuel, they get destroyed. You lose your clone. I learned that. I don't know how much I lost. I lost somewhere between 5 and 20 billion because the one things went down in New Caldari.
Yeah, if you
and I was completely without warning. So I mean, in my gameplay, I don't trust these structures long term.
yeah, because somebody can just pull the plug on the structure that your clones are in without you knowing it, and those are gone.
Yeah,
Right. I want to clarify something. If the structure runs out of fuel, the clone becomes inaccessible, but just simply refueling the structure will allow the clone to be accessible again. It doesn't just outright destroy the clone. The structure itself or the clone bay has to be destroyed or removed in order for the clone itself to be destroyed, or your contract be revoked.
Yeah, the window between when it ran out of fuel and when it got destroyed was very small.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that I can do about it because you can't jump to it if it's dead.
That's a solid point. So from the point of low fuel to one of the various wrecking crew style groups coming through is approximately 7 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even know that it was. I got 0 alerts. I didn't know that it was out of fuel. Right. I didn't know that it was at risk. I literally had
That's
0
weird.
warning. I even checked it 2 days before, and it was fueled. It went out of fuel and then died.
That's weird.
Wow, that's super fast.
The only structures that I would trust to keep a clone in long term are major coalition stagings, keep stars, or whatever the biggest the owners can afford as their main staging, like, or the perimeter keep star. Like one of my implant sets, I've kept it in NPC station and not touched it for the past year because I don't trust it moving us. I don't know of any citadels that I have spare clothes in that I would trust to keep it in.
Yeah. Like it's fine to store them there for like a couple days, but if you're doing long-term storage, you always put it in an NPC station.
Earlier, someone had mentioned about, how many of these, high-sec Athenors are out there. And I know in my particular small gameplay, when they changed the moon mining in high-sec, at that time I had about a half dozen, and took the 2 that were the least profitable, unanchored them, and then as the cores started becoming available, end of November, beginning of December, made the decision on which 2 I was going to keep, cored those, and pulled up the other 2. Well, I pulled up one of them. I didn't get there in time on the second, and it got snatched up. So somebody got a free Athenor off me.
Yeah, it's a very common. Like people like to give crap up to people or organizations about it, but it is a very common problem because the issue is that you have this timer, and if somebody else is more on top of it than you, then they can punish you for that if that information gets leaked out. But more importantly, you pretty much have to stay on top of it for 7 days, because you start the timer and it ends in 7 days from the last time you start the timer. And a lot of people will restart the timer multiple times to try to make sure that nobody actually understands or knows when the timer is, because as soon as you start on anchoring, it says it's on anchoring. So most of the time you'll start and stop it multiple times, so that way people don't really know what it is, because otherwise they can see that it started going on anchoring and know roughly when it's going to come out. So it's really complicated, and if you at any point have something that happens in your real life and you're not paying attention, oftentimes you don't have very many people to fall back on, because you're trying to keep it secret because you don't want it to be stolen. Which incidentally, to bring this all home, to talk about the Clone Bay thing, that's the other half of this, which is that to the outside observers, you can go for basically zero warning, because a structure effectively goes from existing to not existing. And there's a 7-day timer that's hidden to you unless you see the fact that the structure is unanchoring, like by just seeing it from looking at it yourself.
Well, let me make that a little bit clear, which is if you don't own the structure, you don't see anything, except if you happen to be looking at it at the exact moment it switches from anchored to unanchoring. Then you can say, oh, that just switched. Let me mark 7 days from now. But the person the person that owns it, though, can always go into it and check the clock, because it will say you have 2 days, you have 1 day, you have 19 hours. It's counting down to when the exact moment, 7 days later, that it will switch to a can as opposed to a structure where everything changes.
Yeah, it has to specifically be someone who has structure roles in the owning corporation, not just someone in the owner corporation.
Right. So
all I'm saying is that it sounds like a colossally stupid thing for somebody to do, but in reality, anybody who has managed structures for more than any amount of time whatsoever, that has included unanchoring structures, has had one of their structures stolen from them. I almost guarantee it.
Yeah, like over the past year, 4 different keep stars got either stolen or their extraction was prevented by someone else attempting to loot, and then the freighter getting blown up and it not dropping.
The most famous one was Mercenary Coalition losing it in 2018, right before EU Vegas. But let me throw this over. You okay, Hateless?
Yeah, I'm fine.
All right. I'll start with you, Hateless, on this question. This is something Ash and I have talked a lot about. Originally, when structures were coming out, one of the things that CCP had as a goal was to get people to use the structures, because you don't want to develop this whole line of features for the next 8 years and nobody really likes them or uses them. So you want people to use them. And the incentives were, as you can see, there's lots of incentives to use a personal structure as opposed to a game issued structure like an NPC station. Do you think, and I'll open this up to all you guys after Hateless, do you think CCP still cares about user adoption of the structures, or do they kind of see NPCs as a viable option for people now?
So the way you're framing the question, it's kind of you're saying that they're not as useful, or do you think that CCP doesn't?
Is it
I'm
pushing
trying to
people?
understand the frame.
Yeah, sorry. When they first came out, CCP was pushing people to get into their personal structures. And the thinking was that at some point they're going to take away NPC stations, so you better get into a structure. But I think now, I wonder if that's still their desire, to push people towards player-owned structures as opposed to NPC structures.
The NPC structures need to exist. Like, they just have to.
You think they'll never go away?
There's no way they won't ever. There's no way that they can remove them all. We definitely need them for like agents and missions if they want to continue with having missions in the game. We need them as a secure place to put our stuff when we leave the game. And we also need the Jada Trade Hub, because that's a big part of the community. I don't foresee those becoming player-owned in any foreseeable future or for any reasonable reason. I think that CCP does care that we use structures that we build, and having them be valuable assets is incredibly important. And I would think that CCP would think that they are important as well and continue to push them, but I don't think that they will completely ever replace NPC stations.
Let me try to reframe this a little bit. So
Go ahead.
when structures first came out, one of the things I mentioned, and one of the things I've talked about a lot when it comes to the Citadel expansion and the changes that were made during that era, was that significant design concessions were made in each of these cases in order to provide carrots that would serve to make players feel good about the uses of these new tools, structures, and capitals in particular. And now, one of the things is that we're seeing CCP recognize that some of the caveats that they have made need to be walked back. And I believe that the question is, do you see these changes to Citadels represent that CCP feels that adoption of structures is satisfactory now and no longer need these like additional carrots to ensure adoption?
I would guess that they're already adopted, like they're fully adopted in our gameplay, and so I don't really see carrots being necessary to encourage use more. If anything, they're being used too much. But I mean,
So
It's also a school of thought on that part of that carroting made them too safe and too secure for your assets. And
absolutely.
boy, a lot of
I mean, asset safety is a little too powerful. It's a little silly.
So was that a fair reframing, Matterall?
Yeah, let's say it was.
Okay,
All right. Well, let's
cool.
let's.
Because now I want to respond to it.
Okay. So you set up your own question.
because
okay,
well, no,
go ahead.
I tried to interpret your question.
Let me
and
ask
now I
myself
wanted
a
to-
question. Okay, thanks for asking me.
I attempted to. I was trying to figure out what, or
Yeah,
see
the
if that was
essence
what you
of
were
the
trying
issue,
to ask. Yeah. Either way.
Yeah.
So the thing is that the significant advantages that were put into structures at that time, and since then, are not the things that they have weakened them with. In other words, industry structures are still significantly better than NPC structures at building industry. Military structures are still more powerful, like have advantages for military people. At least once you're projecting yourself into the structure game, having Astrohuses and other military level structures is an advantage. Likewise, if you want to have your own personal mining field, as crappy as they are in some places right now, you get there by having an Athanor. But the key here is that at this point, the adoption is a group has to make the decision to have their own structures. That's really, I mean, like, obviously there are public structures and there's all the different like social orders and everything like that. But the thing is that the tying it to war decks kind of recontextualized structures where this is now like you can use the NPC services and that's fine, but you want to use a player structure if you really want to get the best for the tippy top stuff. And the way you can do that is either using a player structure, or using somebody that's outside of your control, which is super risky, or having sufficient force to be able to defend against the threats that come, but and accepting the fact that you are either being war decked or at least your structure is exposed and they will destroy it if you're not willing to defend it.
All right. What's that octopus back there? What is that?
His name is Sir Earl Quincy Hydebass V Esquire, and he's my stream mascot.
Do you actually have like and you're and what's that other mascot you have there? That's it looks like a floating cat.
That's Nika. That's Nika. That's the cat that's always bugging us on the streams.
Right. Somehow that cat just totally wants some fame because he appears to get active whenever we roll. All right. Awesome pets.
Yeah. I talk to a lot of like newer or smaller scale corporations, like people who are just trying to take their first steps or trying to understand the game as like a collective group, usually like somewhere between 3 to 10 dudes or whatever. And the thing is that I think that one of the things that experienced players in particular, or people that haven't tried to be some sort of leadership position, don't appreciate that a lot of the newer players are having to deal with based on this system is that there is this new thing where because of the Wordex system, you can make your corporation. You and your team can like have your identity, but there's this constant pressure that like you could always be doing better. You can't win an industry because your margins are destroyed by people that do have those structures. So it's EVE Online is a series of puzzles that need to be solved, and structures are one of those really interesting solutions to the puzzle that either demand you have this social prowess to use other people's stuff, or the the social or physical fortitude to defend it yourself, or some other plan.
Right. Yeah, I think when the structures come into the equations for building, I don't know if you'll agree with this, Nick, but for me, it kind of blew that whole area for me. Like, it was, well, I actually one of the few people in the game, maybe the only one in the game that really liked teams when they came out. I didn't like the concept at first, and then when they came out, I was like, I really like this concept because I can make decisions strategically on where I produce the materials I want to produce, and that changes constantly. So now I have an active gameplay to industrial stuff. But once they took that out, the active...
Real quick.
Yeah.
So during one of the previous expansion, during one of the industrial passes, one of the things they did was introduce a concept of teams, which were effectively buffs that you bid on. So there was a bidding phase, and then there was a working phase. So you would bid on a certain team, and if you or your corporation or alliance won the bid, then that team would go to your structure and would provide some sort of boost to some form of industry based on what team it was to that structure for that brief period of time. It was introduced into the game. It was pretty controversial and was removed pretty quickly after it was introduced. Now then, go.
Right. So the reason they took it away wasn't because people didn't like it. I guess it wasn't used, but people figured out how to game the auctioning system, and then it became a point of contention, and CCP was like, let's just take that out because this is the new CCP, and we don't leave things in the game that aren't working, right? So that they were trying to prove that they were like the new CCP.
Our mission's still in the game, if that was the thought.
At one time, they were like, we know, we have a reputation for putting something in the game and never coming back to fix it. So instead, we're going to tighten up the game. We're going to put stuff in it and fix it. And if we don't, we're going to take it out. And they were like, here's this Teams example. It's a feature that we talked about. We put it in there. It's been kind of gamed by some players. People are arguing about it, complaining. It's not getting used as much as we thought. We're not going to fix it. We're going to take it out. And so they took it out. But what that left was, and the reason I brought it up, is structures then still had bonuses depending on the push influence, which is much like dynamic bounty system. If you're all in the same place, your costs for doing things go up. So it makes you want to spread out. It pushes you out. And the opposite was supposed to be the pool function, and that was supposed to be teams. So teams would appear in different systems all over the galaxy that were specialized. So that would pull you to it. If you wanted to build drones, you would get pulled to that system where you would get 10% bonus for building drones or 10% savings. And so they took out the pull mechanism, and all they had was the push mechanism, which is what structures do and what the industrial index does. But ever since that happened, I've kind of stopped using structures. Like at that point, I was like, I don't know. It was like, it wasn't working for me. I don't know if anybody else had that, but that's kind of when my industrial career started to slow down.
I don't know. We have a network of structures, and I try not.
Everybody
to
else is fine. It's just me, I think.
Go on.
Yeah. All right.
But there's something in what you said that I keyed off of, but now
it's all right. I want to go to the next topic. Well, we have Hateless here before he has to take off.
Oh, I'm good. I got time, dude.
Oh, do you? Okay. All right. Go ahead, Nick. What were you going to say?
Well, on the subject again of the smaller industrial guy, kind of like me.
Yeah.
When they came out with the structures we go ahead and build in, as a small group trying to be competitive, one of the huge things a lot of folks didn't look at was, okay, if you're a 10-man corps, want to build some stuff, all right, cost of that structure, outfitting it, and fueling it, and how long does that return before the return on investment is actually turning into a profit? And we looked at it, and it would have been, for as small of an operation as we were, and we were just building some Hulks and some T2 ships, we were looking at 16 to 18 months before the break-even point. So it was like, guess not in our case.
Yeah, one of the interesting.
Oh,
go ahead, Hateless.
Sorry?
Who was that, Hateless or you?
No,
Ash.
that was Ash.
All right, go ahead.
I wanted to point out. Now I just lost it again. Never mind.
That was Ashterothi that had a point and lost it.
Twice.
Yeah,
I know that feel, man.
I would put up talk bubbles, but we do an introduction at the beginning of the show. If you ever want to know who's talking, we'll remind people whose voice is who. But if you've listened to Talking in Stations over the years, you know all these names and people. But I'm willing to do that for new people.
Oh, I remember what it was now. So you were discussing the push and pull mechanic, and so I wanted to stress that the issue that actually happened there was that CCP was replacing the old jobs line system. So every station had only so many lines, and so if all of those lines were full, you had to wait in a queue, which would make it so that basically it would take, like, if you wanted to build in JITA, for example, you could. It would take you like a month in order to get a line to do something, maybe, because they were all taken for that amount of time. So when they moved over to the structures system, they also removed the idea of lines. And so to continue to put some sort of pressure to get people to just not everybody build everything in JITA, they added this idea of an index. And so then they were also experimenting with the idea of having people be pulled to specific places, as you described, which is ultimately why they scrapped it quickly rather than attempting to iterate on it, because their core design philosophy, having people be pushed away so that way they can't all just build in one place, was still intact. And that was just like an extra experiment on top of that. That would have been a cherry.
Right. Those are those famous choke points. You know what's interesting about those? It's just a little thing. If you were here a long time ago and you had to queue up, I didn't realize you had to queue up. I thought you had to wait until it expired and then jump in. So it wasn't getting in line. It was like, as soon as it gets to 0, then you jump in. And I was like, it just never gets to 0. Took me a while to figure that out.
The queuing on that worked the same way with the research stations too, if I recall.
Yeah, all that stuff. All right, I put some names up so you can see who's talking. Okay, something else. Oh, okay. So Pando, who's a top FC in the game, says, whenever I listen to this kind of stuff, I'm surprised at how little I know about industry after all this time. And I totally agree with you.
That's what I love about EVE Online. Here, one of the popular FCs, probably somebody who knows their shit when it comes to EVE Online, you would say, just say something like that. And some industrialist that's been in this game for 20 years may not know how to fly a cruiser safely in low sec. Like, this game is vast, and there's a space for a lot of different play styles.
Yeah, if the Hollow 180 says, I remember when you had to wait till it expired, maybe that's when I learned that I had to wait, and I never knew that they made a queue system, if it was ever separated that way.
Yeah, I agree with Panda. I've recently been trying to get started on industry to fund my PvP activities, and every time I see something, it's something new that I don't know about.
Right. Well, I mean, we can have a show on industrial. Actually, we have somebody that just came aboard Talking in Stations that you all might know if you ever listened to Cap Stable, which was a podcast about 4 years ago, maybe more like 6 to 4 years ago. And his name was Kuda, right? And he did industrial stuff. And so I used to like listening to him because he was a new guy. He was in Brave Newbies at the time. And he was breaking down how he was learning in the industrial process. And it was really cool because he was very thorough. And so even a veteran like me was listening to him saying, you know, not only has he got all the stuff I know, but he's plugging holes of info that I didn't know or something. So that was pretty cool.
I start the timer and then I...
Who's got an open mic? Is that me? That's not me, is it? All right. So Hateless, another question for you. Because I want to see if I can get some info out of you. We talked about this on Sunday, but you and Ashterothi in the same room might be a pretty cool combination about Winter Nexus, this event that just happened. You liked it a lot. Ashterothi's very pumped on it. He thinks it's the best one they ever had. But I want to know if you can approach it this time from, and I don't know if you can, I'm asking, the direction of a newer player getting involved in the Winter Nexus, that kind of event. Is there an entry point for newer guys? Like, could you have done that in high sec with much success?
I mean, I believe... Sorry, I had to dump my push talk somewhere. I believe that... what was I going to say? Hold on. So, a Praxis was able to do it with a relatively cheap fit with actually a low bar of entry. So it was probably easier. It would have probably been pretty easy for a new player to get into it. It would have taken, if they didn't have any of the required skills, it would have taken them most of the event to train into it. But it was possible for newer players to hop in and join. And I did come across a few newer players that were successfully contesting as well and having high contest success rates, which was really impressive.
Tell me what contest means in this.
So in the combat sites, what happened was all the loot was in one ship's wreck. And whoever got that wreck won the loot, basically. So it was he who did the most damage to that wreck got the loot. And there were practices everywhere running them. And rapid light missile launcher practices were doing very well in contesting the sites. And the bare minimum to run the sites was actually really easy to, get into. So, I believe that it was fairly accessible to new players. And then there's also the whole exploration side of it, which is fairly new bro friendly. They would have had to spend a little bit on their steros, but if they took that to low sec, they would have gotten some good ISK. That's kind of awesome.
Most of what I was doing in game between Christmas and the M2 fight was just Asteros going around low sec and for that, and I made a decent amount of ISK, enough to profit despite having lost a few Asteros. It was more than I usually make in a week.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that's important to note is that there's a difference between a low skill point character and a new player.
Right.
Interestingly enough, a new player doesn't know about the praxis. It isn't in the basic thing. And so there is an act of now the good news is that a new player that attempts to try to understand these sites by just looking at them will likely run into a praxis pretty quickly. And if they look at enough of these sites, if they get far enough along, they'll understand that that's what everybody's using, and a quick search will confirm that. But my point is that a newer player, this is still a pretty big obstacle for a brand new player to understand, because the site itself was designed for a well-tanked battlecruiser, or real players battlecruiser to be able to handle. And so by that note, a relatively new player with low SP in a praxis can still hang, because the praxis brings so much to the table and doesn't require any skill points to do so, just by nature of being a battleship. But the honest to God truth is that new players that were getting into these sites did so best as groups. And that is the thing I cannot stress enough about these sites and previous sites and CCP's stated philosophy about these sites, which is that they are designed to be easier to fight in groups, and not just faster, but if the NPCs, for example, are taught or trained to split their DPS, then that means that a group of 3 cruisers have to deal with significantly less most of the time, and have less of a chance of something significantly bad happening than a single battleship that has everything focused on it. And it also means that things like drone ships are more viable, because if you're in a site by yourself and you launch your drones are the only other target. So when the rats go to switch targets, they will destroy your drones. But if you're with other fleet members, they will be more higher priority targets for the rats to go after. So new players working together as a group were extremely effective in this event.
Was there a good way to group up?
So I mean,
talk to people in local. You'll make friends.
Is it like an incursion where there's an incursion where there's a channel that opens up specifically for the event?
No, but the thing is that you get there with a filament. So the key is that you and your buddies, we could just be in Pimene and we just click a button and now we're in one of the sites, right? So the idea is that
where do you get the buddy?
Players have
right.
Well, this is an activity for a corporation.
Is there,
hopefully you would have a corporation, or you would be working towards. Is
there like a grinder for Eve, or what do they call those applications that?
Well, actually,
start talking to people. You don't have friends in Eve, just start talking in local. You'll make friends.
It's worth noting that on the agency, which is where the event is, in the same area in that marquee section in the top right of the agency, where the winter event goes, is also the corporation tool. And so this is another thing that older players might want to start keying in on, because newer players are being taught subtly by the UI that is a good place to go to find a corporation. And so it may be interesting to find out how much that has changed adoption of using the corporation advertisement tools.
I don't know.
I know I haven't been using it enough.
I'm not convinced. I think they're okay. So CCP did a really good job of putting on the on-ramps for people who were here and that wanted to get involved. I think we all can agree to that, right? Gets you right into it with the filaments, gets you right into the system where you need to do the thing. And they gave those filaments out free just for logging in. If you logged in on the third day or day 3, then you got them. Or you could just buy them off the market and they were super cheap. Okay, got that. But if you're saying you needed to kind of group up with people and you're a new guy or a guy with low SP, I start to feel like, well, that's another part of it then that CCP needs to work on, because you need to give people easy ways to raise their hand and say, can I play? Can I get in? Can I get in on this game?
It's literally called local, and you can talk to people and find people.
But local's full of dirty, trashy,
There is also an event. There is also an events channel. My point is that there are multiple tools, and they are working on those tools to get people towards a group to let them do what they want. The point of this is that really all this needs to be is the thing for that group to do. Because and hopefully these things will become more and more rhythmic, so that way, because the thing that I would like to see happen is, like within my own alliance, a growing group of people that are interested in events, understanding that like the old emerging conduits were awesome, but any system that's stagnant long enough will become solved and then botted, and therefore these events kind of solve that problem in the fact that it's like every couple of weeks or every month or so, we have 2 or 3 weeks out of the month, half the time, there are these special sites. They come, they are more or less the same power level as any given month. They may have some flavor changes here and there, tank changes based on the local fauna, but more or less, like, they are a thing that you can identify, adapt to, maximize, enjoy, and then get over and move on from, and not give people enough time for it to really become solved before, once it becomes stale, then that event is over and you move on to the next event. And I really, really, really hope that this becomes a stable pattern, so that way we can become like focused on these PvPvE sites, not knowing what the site is going to be at any given time, but knowing that a group of 3 to 5 people roughly would be useful to do it.
Here's my complaint, and I throw this over to Hateless. I'm an experienced player, and I've tried to get involved in these events, and I find they're not easy to get involved with. This is the first time that they were easy to get involved with, because they gave you the entry key, right? So you just
I really liked that they gave filaments then made it easy to get involved with. I barely did any previous event, but because the filaments were made it so easy to get there. Like I said, between Christmas and the M2 fight, I barely did much else in the game.
So my second point, and I brought this up before, is Hateless, you're saying just asking local. So is it your experience?
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be local, but I mean, if you sit in station and don't reach out to anybody, and you just keep to yourself, nobody's going to talk to you. But if you go out there and you try to do the site, somebody will run into you. You talk to that person. You right-click on the pilot, open up a conversation, and try and talk to them. That one person might not be the best person to talk to, but you know what? If he talks back, you have somebody to talk to now. That's further than you were before. He may not be what you're looking for, but if you keep on doing this and keep on looking for people, you will find friends. You will make friends. That is what you have to do to make friends. Do you mind if I do a short story really quick that's Uneve related that kind of follows this along?
Sure, yeah.
On this subject?
Yeah, sure.
So when I first bought my my bike a few years ago, I had no friends that rode motorcycles at all. Not a single one. And so what I did is I hopped on my motorcycle and I went and I rode around. And whenever I came across another bike, I'd follow him for a little while. And sometimes they pulled over and we'd talk. I made so many friends just doing that. Like, obviously, somebody's angry that you're following them around. You're not going to pull over with them. You kind of get a feel for people. And I literally have made the best friends in my life doing that.
How was this story?
I'm still friends with one of the people that I chased down. It's one of my best friends.
Wow.
Like,
you literally started chasing.
Yeah, I just started reaching out to people. Like, I didn't know anybody. I just come across another biker, followed him around. We stopped at a stop sign. I left my bike. Said, "Hey, man, want to go ride together sometime?" Like that. That's it. Like,
so. First of all,
the starting point.
I
is
love
that
story.
To reach out
for many reasons. I love that story, and
you need to reach out to make friends. You sit in on yourself. You won't reach out. You have to do it in a friendly manner. You can't like follow somebody for 5 miles and say, "Hey, man, pull over." Like, that's not going to work. But like, I'm riding, see somebody, I turn around, I catch up. Next stoplight, I lift the visor and try and talk to them. They don't talk to me, I move on. Like, it was that simple.
Has anybody ever not talked to you or said like, "Why are you talking to me? I don't know who you are"?
Oh, I had people get gruffy and I don't want to talk to you, or people that just like there were a few like that, but like.
Okay.
I mean,
you overcame something that might be harder for shy people, I would imagine.
Yeah. At that time in my life, I viewed myself as extremely shy, and I had never done anything like that before. So it was definitely outside of my comfort bubble when I did that.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting is that it's a little safer to do something like that in this less personal environment, right? Your face isn't up for grabs. Your expressions of like, "Oh, I'm not liked," aren't up for grabs. So you just have text, and it's a little safer to try to say, "Hey, can I do a thing?" So I commend you for doing that in real life.
I want to clarify something, which is that these sites were absolutely doable as a solo. As we pointed out, the Praxis was more equipped to do it, whatever. But my point is that the sites themselves are not at a power level that an average new player has the experience and skill points and access to ISK that would allow them to use the equipment that would take these sites without some other piece of the puzzle, right? So the point is that these function. If it was true that a less than 1 month old pilot or a 2 month old pilot even had the capability of easily having enough ISK to purchase a ship capable of running these sites by themselves and solo them, then why would you use anything else, right? So to get the best answers, this goes back to what we were saying earlier. Like, EVE Online is a series of puzzles and problems that need to be solved. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to solve it by using a group. But my point is that this site, unlike other even PvE sites, is structured in such a way to overwhelmingly reward group behavior, because it's not just that you're running the site faster, but the rats themselves split their DPS and split their effects.
And there's advantages for that, and I get it. The idea is
right, but
I'm just
but
using
not
it
just
as
advantages,
a
but access. because
Right.
3 people can use 30 million ISK cruisers and still succeed. And therefore, because the problem is that when you say that it takes a praxis, then somebody expects to need 2 to 300 million ISK in order to be able to do it.
Right.
But
Well,
when you explained it to them that if you another option is to have a group of people work together in basic T1 cruisers, and that is successful, then that gets really, really interesting.
okay.
Yeah, one of the things is that, well, the Eve community generally, there's a common assumption that if it's possible to solo a PvP activity, that's the only way that's worth doing it. But that's not really true. Although, of all the groups that I've been part of, only Eve University has consistently provided ways to do group versions of stuff for people not able to do it solo yet.
Yeah.
There's earlier on one of the folks in chat, I believe it was Convict Treacherer, mentioned he didn't start the game until September, but he used Hateless's Praxis build in HiSec. It trained the skills he could in the time and still made a good chunk of ISK. And I've been scrolling up looking for his name, so I hope I got that proper.
Yeah. Well,
Right, but that's my point.
Yeah.
He was faced with a problem that he was able to identify that one way or another he had to engage with the community in order to solve this problem. I don't know if it's bringing friends or bringing friends into the game. I don't know if it's accessing, Hateless stream or going to various different websites. But the key here is that this is that bridge point which basically simultaneously presents a player with a challenge that they would like to overcome, and the opportunity for organized groups like corporations and stuff to begin to make this kind of activity the sort of thing that they do as an activity to make money and to remain a group.
So Ash, are you saying this is a good thing or a bad thing? Like
super good.
Super good.
Super
Yeah,
good.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Just
like this goes
clarifying,
back.
because the way you're wording it kind of sounds like it could be a bad thing, but I also agree with you. It is a fantastic thing that it forces players to kind of come together and work as a team. I think that is fantastic. You meet friends, you get to know people. That is what this game is about, right?
What's really cool about that, though, is
was
that it has this
most fun I
natural
had.
progression. Sorry,
most fun I had in Eve, maybe second most fun I had, was doing incursion fleets when those came out, because you were forced to group up with people you didn't know and you felt needed. And so you had, they would say like, we need a Logi pilot. And you're like, I could do that. And so you jumped in, and then you had this instant group of cooperating people to do this thing. And I did that for the first few weeks not because I needed to do it, but because I really enjoyed being able to possibly meet new people. That was the big thrill there.
Right. And so here's the thing, though, and this is why this is so incredibly critical. Things like incursions and even all these other things, those actually do have some sort of high barrier to entry, right? So one of the things that's interesting is we're trying to become an incursion fleet running group ourselves, but basically we have to stand it up from scratch because we're not just going to like always join another fleet or whatever. So like we have to do massive amounts of logistical effort that an organization smaller than the Convocation would just fail to do. So this isn't something that a small team of guys that are all playing EVE Online together just does as their day-to-day activity. But when it comes to these kinds of events, this changes everything, because so a normal player, so like we have people in our corporation all the time that's just sitting around waiting kind of for things for there to be things to do. They don't understand enough about the game to go out and quote unquote make their own things. The things that they know to do are things that are relatively safe for them to do, which means they're probably bored with them. So they would be very excited if some sort of FC would throw together some of the more organized things, but asking them to do it, that's a whole nother echelon above them. So with this event, individuals can go out and start running them. But at the same time, if people want to, they can start running them together. And as I said, like if a new player right now, because players don't also come into this game in isolation. New players often come in clusters of 2 or 3 people, and often those friend groups fail out, and maybe one person sticks to it because there aren't really good objectives for that tier of player.
Right.
And there's a whole bunch of upsetting things. I put up a structure and then it gets blown up. whatever. Like
I got ganked.
and then
I lost my stuff that I'd been saving for a week. Yeah. I got
and then one friend leaves, and then the friend group collapses, and now you've got one person out of the whole group that cares about EVE Online enough to stay. But I'm telling you right now, if I'm describing your group right now, if you start thinking about how these events go, then by Easter, your group will have the power it takes to be extremely successful in these sites, including the harder sites. We went to LowSec. And
all right, save us the example. We get it. You'll be successful, but I want to make this into a larger meta ask. And
my point was, other people started running the fleets afterwards when I wasn't running them anymore.
So the knowledge transfers to other people. The meta question here.
And no, this is the part that's really, really important to me.
All right,
and I feel like we keep missing it because every step of the way is natural to those people. Right? So a group of new players are checking this out. This is the cool content to check out, right? Like, I just started playing this game. What is there to do? Oh, there's these cool events. How do I do it? Well, the best way to do it is with a small team. Okay, cool. Like, now you could figure out how to get your battleship, or if it just so happens that you guys have a team, there's now these team building exercises. And that group does that, and they're relatively successful. They learn to play with each other. And here's the thing. Within a few short days, they feel pretty comfortable. And then the fact that the harder sites, which aren't really harder, they usually just take a little bit longer and offer crazy better rewards, are just on the other side. And so suddenly these guys had no intention of PvPing, are going into dangerous areas. They still actually have no intention of PvPing, although they are in fully functional PvP ships. And this is the most critical thing, you've now tricked that group into going into somewhere dangerous and doing something dangerous for money. And because they are working as a team, often they're more successful than you would expect. And now you have people operating as a team in a fleet doing crazy, more and more in-depth stuff. And the next event, they may go deeper, or they may try something else. They may go into Mordu's Legion sites. They may do whatever. But what this does is it basically creates a breadcrumbed trail that brings somebody to, I don't really know what's going on, and leads them into increasingly, there's always a reason to go deeper down the rabbit hole in this case.
All right. Did you make your point the way
you
wanted to?
That was my full rant. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, the big meta question is here, and I mentioned it before, and that is, where's the grinder for EVE? I don't know if a grinder is that app. What's the app where you swipe, like the dating service app?
Tinder. Grinder is one of them. It is.
Moving on. Still, CCP Hilmar.
I'm kind of disturbed that he knows that.
Yeah. Grinder's the one that I hear about.
That one's notably for homosexual people.
Okay.
So,
well, that explains it. Okay, so Grindr.
But CCP Hilmar has suggested that we should have a looking for group functionality, and they have danced around the idea. So that might be something coming soon.
Okay. Yeah.
How would a looking for group functionality work when the first thing that new players get told is that they should never trust anyone else that they encounter in the game?
Yeah, right. That's a problem. Go ahead, Nick.
That can only be overcome by literally sticking your neck out and taking a chance. And that's kind of how it happened to me when I was a very new player. I was cruising through LowSec because I didn't know any better. And 2 guys jumped on me and just about killed me. I got lucky because I was autopiloting through LowSec. I made it to the gate, went through. About a minute and a half later, they came through while I was repairing, and they chatted me. And they're like, "Dude, do you know what you were doing?" I'm like, nope. And we started to chat, and that was the first core I joined.
A very common story.
Did they say, are you on Grindr?
So one story I have from this event is I was out in LowSec running them with my 2 Dracovics, and I had somebody pop in local. He tried to catch me and failed. And then we started talking because he tried and failed. So we opened up a line of communication. We're like, well, obviously we can't kill each other, so let's try and be friends. And what ended up happening is some locals came in and we actually ended up helping each other. We literally like worked together, built some trust, and ended up helping each other. It was fantastic. Like that happens. I think that's really neat. You just have to take the risk, right?
Yeah, you're right.
So I actually want to just address that question directly, though, with if the only thing they know is that they can't trust anybody. The issue is the other half of that, which is the only thing that they understand about their own capabilities, that they know nothing about how the game works, but that they'll be punished if they do something wrong. So that's actually the bigger threat, because that's the reason why you need so much trust to work with somebody, because you don't understand the way that other people can be a threat to you, and therefore they are an absolute threat to you. You don't know when they can attack you. You don't know how they can trick you into attacking you. You don't know anything yet, and therefore you can't even evaluate that problem. And so part of the solution here, and you've seen it actually in what CCP has done, is provide varying degrees of protection from social, within the social structures, i.e. there are certain things that you're not allowed to do. You can make corporations not friendly fire. You can monitor fleet records in specific ways, and maybe they might institute other protections if they wanted to. But by allowing there to be understandable systems that allow us to experiment with social interactions with one another in a way that we feel safe, will allow us to build those social bonds, and then the real trust comes as we then together start to build something together.
Okay. I still want to build Grinder for Eve. I think that is like a good use of some coding skills for somebody. In fact, I think you could actually really deploy it in any MMO, right? Because the promise of an MMO is not that you're going to go and meet everybody. It's that you're going to go and meet somebody, but you don't know who. And you really need to like go through a ton of people to figure out like who your friends are, who a good corporation is for you, what a good fit looks like, et cetera, et cetera. And you can have so many bad experiences before you ever get even close to that. Like we've all had that problem. So why not build some kind of application that says real talk, not this fictional, we do everything. We mine, we fight, we do this, we do that, we do it all, that are in the recruitment post, but something that is a lot more maybe AI intensive, where you say, these are my personality traits. And then they could say, okay, well, let's match you up with someone who is not the same as you, but just a little mutation. And then you can actually find your people. You know what I mean? Like that would be great.
And
that would be Talking in Stations, the Grinder edition.
I don't disagree with you, and CCP, like this
or
is
the other one,
kind of one of the $1 million answers. But I just need you to agree right now, at this time, but regardless of how seriously you're going to do it, I need you to run for CSM this year under the platform of Grinder for Eve. Please. Please.
I will. This is
awesome. You heard it here first.
This is an idea I floated about 5 years ago when I was at TMC, and I was like, let's figure out what we're trying to do here. And that was the vision that I wanted to pursue was, a Tinder, swipe left, swipe right, swipe left, swipe right on characteristics until you kind of actually discovered a group that might actually fit you. And I'm talking meta stuff too, not just I want to mine in big ships, small ships, whatever. Not those kinds of questions, but my favorite color is blue. I'm religious in this way. I'm not religious. I love the occult. I like atheism. You start to really kind of find your people in this mad MMO world that's out there. Or, just like I respect pirates. Pirates are evil. Like that's a fundamental question. And whatever side of that question you're on will totally dictate who you're even comfortable with and who makes you feel totally terrible. So there's some easy questions that we could get through. What do you guys think of that? I don't know. Maybe we should do it.
So I may or may not have purchased the domain for new-eden.me and new-eden.space with the idea that, like, one of the dreams that I've had is to make a place where people can have their profiles, much like a WoW armory or something. So you can, opt in via API and whatnot. And we can track not only, what you have and what you've done, but we can also potentially create like an achievement system. So that way, if you've been to certain systems, we can record that. If you've been part of specific fights, we could detect that based on kill mails or whatever, and allow people to kind of like have your like, we used to have, what was that? It was Eve. What was the Facebook of Eve? There was an Eve portal website thing that they had that was super not a thing for a long time, and then they got rid of it. But they dabbled with this idea of a social media space for your character, basically, where you can showcase stuff about your character and coordinate.
Well,
it never got it never even got close to realizing that, but it was like the way that you could check your mail outside of the game before the app.
The point is, can you imagine how many bad corporations you could have avoided? Like, actually, I didn't run into that many bad corporations. They were pretty good because I did what you do, Hateless. I would just basically talk in public, and if I liked, what somebody was saying, I would be like, well, who do you, what's your group like? Are you guys recruiting? And it's as easy as that because almost everybody's recruiting. So maybe it's,
Weren't you like 5 minutes ago super skeptical of him saying that he talks in local, and now you're like, I did it too? Like,
no, I loved his story where he basically chased guys on motorcycles and said, "You want to ride together?" Like, that was, to me, that takes some guts. Like, I would,
and I think that that's part of what Eve is, especially why it like deals with real life, like why it teaches real life skills, right? Because it lets us confront real life problems. Ultimately, dealing with things like a problem that requires coordination or communication or cooperation in order to solve, like that's a real thing. Doesn't matter how much of a video game it is, that's a real thing. And so how people respond to it. Another good one is, like the risk versus reward of EVE Online. When you talk to somebody, especially like you'll find maybe somebody's only run missions their entire life for like years and years and years, and they'll talk about LowSec as things like, I can't go there because it's too dangerous or something like that, as if they're like, they have a threshold and there is no ability to like compensate for an issue, or especially like haulers who may not have ever like looked into how suicide ganking really works. Like, they understand things in a very kind of black and white way, but EVE Online, if you want to be successful, you must face this challenge, right? You never have to take a step up. You never have to go deeper down the rabbit hole. You never have to move into low-sec or null-sec or dangerous space. You never have to join a corporation if you don't want to. But eventually, the fact that you haven't becomes more and more noticeable. And it's either, go deeper down the rabbit hole or get out.
Right. All right. Now, speaking of getting out, we kind of ran a little bit past our time. Do you guys have, Sons of Eve? That's hilarious. I also like that other one, Eve Harmony. It got me thinking. I would say, like, you go in an MMO, you kind of want to meet like a significant, what do you call it? Special lady friend, I think they call it, with Lebowski.
No, all I want is
that's just not going to happen.
All I want is a CSM campaign with the tagline "Grinder for Eve." That's all I ask for.
Yeah. Well, no, in Eve, that's just not going to happen, right? Like, you might as well go to a different game.
Okay. I can honestly see that being a successful line. I really hope it happens.
All right, dude. You got anything else?
Yeah, Hateless. But on your stream right before the show, you were doing an experiment about Instalock. Do you want to tell us about that?
I actually have a clip to show you.
Yeah, I was watching it
Share your screen if you
until
want.
right before the show.
1 second, let me pull it up. We wanted to prove, because we've had this argument on TIS a couple times, and we were arguing about it during my stream today. And I wanted to prove whether or not it was truly possible to catch something that had a sub 2 second alignment time.
Oh yeah, that's hotly debated.
It is possible. We have video proof. We did it. We made it in As far as I'm concerned, the debate's over. It is a fact that it can be done. It is insanely difficult, though. The person doing it had to get his ping below 10.
Oh, yeah, that was the UK ping, right? You're not from England, though.
He was in Germany.
Oh.
So he had really good ping. Let me pull up the video. Do you want me to link it to you and then you can play it on stream, or do you just want me to share my screen?
You play it, share it on screen. I think that'll work. That's why we set up this way, so we can share each other's screens.
Just really briefly. So EVE Online works on a 1 second tick, which means actions happen once a second. The common understanding is that if you have a warp speed below 2 seconds, then that makes you uncatchable, because by the time a person can possibly finish the lock and execute the command to scram you, you have already successfully entered the command or you've already successfully entered into warp. So, but there is a theory that people with extremely low ping versus maybe people with higher ping, or if it's too close to the 2 second mark or whatever it is, that they would still be catchable, but it's so hard that many people believe it's not. So that was the debate. Hateless, what side were you on prior to this?
I was on the side that it was not possible.
Okay. So you actually disproved your own understanding. That's interesting, because that's way different than somebody that proves their own stuff. So you legitimately were trying to prove that you were right.
Yeah.
And you gave at least one or two people a few $100 million ISK for helping.
Yeah.
That is commendable. That's a good point. Hateless does these kinds of experiments, and he's really good at rewarding people. One of the things I remember, oh man, what was it? There was something that everybody is claiming something, and you basically said if somebody got if somebody had video evidence of a scramming ship on a gate during Invasions Chapter 1 and 2, you offered some ridiculous bounty.
Yeah, I was like, if this is possible, prove me wrong. I'm going to give you, here's a challenge. Show me the screenshot, and I will reward you with ISK. And this challenge today, I'm trying to play it in loop for you guys, but I don't know if you guys are actually able to see it. The stream is actually seeing it.
Yeah, they can see
So
it.
this is a short 7-second clip. I had the logs to prove it as well. From all sources, everybody involved gave me their logs. So basically what we're looking at here is a replay of my game capture. What we were doing is I got into a 1.94 second alignment time Synesis, and I made the signature radius as big as possible. So I did everything in the favor. I was confident. Okay, so I put the 500 million. I was like, there's no way. But now I know. I paid the 500 million to learn this lesson. I'm happy to do that, and I'm happy to share it. But what we did is they set up a camp, and I was going in circles near Jita, so it was really accessible for people to do it. There's a system called Neobin that only has an average of 15 people in local, which some people were saying that local population might make it harder or easier. But we probably did 30, 40 laps. I went suspect to give everybody the ability to catch me, and I was doing circles. I was just doing circles over and over. So they set up a camp.
Let me get that straight, just so people understand it. You set up a little route, and you said, you guys can set up on any of those gates. I'm going to circle this route. You guys try to catch me. Is that the situation?
Yes. That's the situation. I gave them every advantage they could get.
Let me be clear. You're landing and then trying to warp again?
No. Out of the gate. So I went in a circle. So I
see. So you're jumping in into one of the gates and then warping and then going to a different.
It wasn't random. I was literally in a circle. So I went
just explained it, Dash.
No, I know, but I thought you meant a circle between the gates within the same system. Right. So I was confused.
Let's let him finish. Go ahead.
So I went Jita, perimeter, Nabinian, and then back to Jita, and just in a circle. I was just going in circles. We probably did this for about 40 minutes. And they have sensor boosters. They have everything. Like, they are literally doing everything. We finally got one where it caught me on the server tick after where I warped. And this is the result. Literally happens in just a fraction of a second. It's almost immediate. I go into warp about a quarter, I'm tackled. That's it.
Wow. You could have had you could have had a little more room at the end of that.
I probably need to extend the clip a little bit.
Yeah. But
that
was fast.
Yeah.
So this is theoretically was impossible, but now we can see that it's very much possible. But that was fast. Oh my God. Oh, you lagged out there. So there. So how did they do it? Oh,
We lose Hateless's volume.
I think your mic came
Oh,
out.
sorry, I'm not push to talk. My cat's here. So their sensor resolution was insanely high. They were above 5,000, and my signature radius was as high as possible. We got it all the way up to over is like 120 meters signature radius on the Signatus. So we got a big signature radius, and so it literally removed the locking time from the equation. And then what we did is, or what happened is, the player that caught me, we asked him the critical data, which was what was his ping. My ping was 30 meters or 30 ms, and his ping was 10. So I had a good ping, and he had a good ping. So it is possible. I do not believe that the ping of the warper or the person warping is important, but he got it in one server ticket. It is possible to happen. Although we made a lot of laps. In 40 minutes, you can make a lot of laps around this 3 little jump area, and there were hundreds of attempts.
Okay,
and we only got one successful
So
attempt.
even with this loadout that he was using, it didn't happen on the very first time he tried to get you.
No, we tried several times.
Okay, so even with the best case scenario, it's not always going to work.
Correct. Somebody can be perfect. He said that his fingers hurt from mashing the buttons over and over and over again. He had his overview set up specifically that so only a Synesis would appear, and before I even appeared, he was sitting there mashing it.
Yeah. All right. Do we have any questions in chat? If you guys have questions, let's have them now. Okay. So chances are, if you have a sub 2 align ping, that's for experienced players to understand. Sorry, new guys. Then you're pretty much safe.
It's like a 99.99 chance that you'll make it through.
Okay, unless you run into a smart bomb.
Barring smart bombs, but yeah.
So that we believed it was impossible.
There was one just, it's not a random question, but one of the folks asked approximately what was the range he was at from you?
Somewhere between 18 and 15, I think, is where he was. We were doing disrupts because they have a longer range, and they were working together. They were remote sensor boosting each other, and we had seriously, we were just doing laps as quickly as we could and talking about it while we were doing it. So the fact that it's possible blew my mind, and I'm happy that we did it.
Sorry about the bubbles there. All right, so we'll get into this stuff later, but it was a long point, which gives you better range. But well, we'll explain that kind of tackling stuff at another time. Most of you guys probably know what the tackling stuff is. Okay, I got to go. I had to go a little while ago. Any other questions? Okay. Any other bits of news or anything? We can take care of news again tomorrow. There's definitely a few little things here and there, but we'll have to.
I just wanted to, I think that we should at least let people know that while we have been doing the daily newsletter and everything in the last couple of weeks, I don't know if people have been paying attention, but there's been something that has taken a lot of attention from people a lot of the time in real life. And so until things kind of get back to normal, things like the daily news article, news bulletin is going to be a best effort kind of a deal as opposed to an actual daily.
Oh, the news. Yeah, I may actually, we're trying to figure out what's doable because I'm running into a lack of, it's just taking too much time. I need more writers. I need more analysts in order to summarize the news so that it becomes a group effort. Because right now, the majority of the writing is, or collecting and stuff is me with Grigorin helping out quite a bit. But yeah, it might be worth doing maybe 3 days a week as opposed to every day. 'Cause some days there's just not a lot of news, and we can fill with finding a small piece of news here and then just elaborating on it. But literally, if you see a cool what do you call it? Kill mail. You have to go write the guy, and the guy has to write you back, and that takes time. And usually I work on this show, and then I take a break, and then I come back and do evening stuff, and it ends up that I'm working alone at midnight Pacific time, and like nobody's awake. So if I have any questions, there's really no recourse for answers. And so
Sure.
it's
but,
trapping.
But beyond the long term, what I'm talking about though is right now, just to make sure everybody's like heads up to the current events. You know, one of the things that's really nice about this kind of community is that we've had almost continuous, you know, like 5 to 10 people in our voice chat, and generally speaking, pretty reasonable discussions as we have attempted to help each other as a community process and discuss and work through all the stuff that's happening in the world. So, you know, during the election, you guys covered the election pretty well. I don't feel like this is something that we cover. We don't have politics episodes instead of you know, Eve episodes as we did with that. But at the same time, a lot of people that make TIS work is paying pretty close attention for various reasons to that as well. So keep that in mind.
Oh yeah, this is something that we revisit every once in a while. But Talking in Stations was literally a show from the editorial view of TMC at the time I was editor, and it was changing to INN, and we decided to make a show, and it would really be like a showing off of articles that were on INN that we had published. And since I was editing, I knew all about those articles, and that was going to be a little review about, you know, the news. But it's become a lot more than that. It grew out of a group of friends, basically, and there's still like an inner core of Talking in Stations, and those guys are all anthropologists, right? They're curious about not only politics and government, but society and video games as well. And I don't mean arcade video games. I mean like deep, consequential, incredibly complicated systems. That's who Talking in Stations is really made up of. And you can see that in the people that we present to you, and you can see that in the feedback from people that we get. That said, when the world goes on fire, like Australia's on fire, or a virus is coming out of Asia, China, or, you know, there's a huge earthquake in Los Angeles, like we're on top of those things. We hear about EVE Online, we hear about real life news at Talking in Stations before it even hits actual news sites and stuff. Like there's an earthquake in California. I'm like, dude, earthquake. I think it's about a 7, you know, and then everybody knows that that's happening, and then they'll hear it 15 minutes later on the news or whatever. So clearly the world's kind of on fire right now in the United States. So we've been distracted by looking at that. But we've had, what's pretty cool, 10 to 20 people constantly inside of our political channel, which you can't see unless you subscribe to it. We're not saying to subscribe to it. Don't go in there, right? Because it's a vibe thing.
Yeah.
Like, unless you really want to do it. But that's where a lot of time has gone with everything. All right, quick question.
I'm really incredibly proud of how we have so far, knock on wood, managed to navigate through all of this stuff. And I think it's very helpful for people of all different spectrums to have a place where it can be discussed and talked through an environment that is successful at having those discussions. So I think that value is incredibly important, but at the same time isn't necessarily the concern for those who aren't opting into that. So we don't necessarily want to be bothering everybody too much about that, but at the same time, I don't want to just let it go unaddressed.
Right. And all this to say, I think that we're looking always at Talking in Stations as a group and trying to figure out, like, what do we want to do? What is this for? Why are we here? What's the purpose of all this work? Because it literally is a full-time job if you're doing it alone. It's just that much work, because you have to run not only the content creation side of it, but also the community side of it, which is a big deal. And there's a lot of help in that regard. We have great people that help out with a lot of this stuff. So it couldn't be done anymore by one person like it used to be. But we're always looking at, what are we, you know?
So just as a note, content creation is not a simple thing to do. There's a lot more involved that people have to do to create content than just sit in front of camera and talk. There's
Yep.
a lot going on, and it is a big job. And even those that only commit a few hours a week, they are committing a lot of their time and effort behind scenes to make it happen. And I have a lot of respect for the people trying to do it, and a lot of respect for the people that are succeeding in it as well. It's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And Talking in Stations has a lot of ideas about like moving forward, and we were going to actually discuss some of that tonight, but obviously we derailed ourselves mostly by me over and over again. So everybody's going to have to wait till later.
Yeah, we'll make it a better
to hear about
announcement. But we have some ideas, we have some plans, and we're a little bit busy, is what we're saying. So bear with us as we make an adjustment, because we went right through holiday season. Like, we didn't stop for holiday season, and we didn't take a break. And we literally need to recalibrate, refocus, make sure we're delivering content that is either, well, it has some added value, right? Either solves your problem or entertains you, or you gain some knowledge from it. So we'll make sure we keep hitting those markers. All right. That feels a little self-indulgent. I have a feeling I may clip that out of this podcast version of this, but whatever. All right, guys.
Yeah, that's why you put it at the end. I just wanted people to know.
Okay, really appreciate you guys coming around, Ashterothi, especially you, getting me motivated to get on here and bringing all the knowledge. Hateless, of course, Grigorin, and Nick, thanks for hanging out with us. Oh, one last
Thank you for having me today. It was a fun day.
Thanks, man. I'm glad you could chill out here with us, and I thought you were. I didn't want to hold you up too long. So one more thing about all this whole thing of talking in stations. I've actually started to put up subscriptions on YouTube, so people can get more involved that way. And I'm thinking actually at some point I'll have to put out a menu of actual rewards we give to people like Nick here, who supported us without any rewards, because all our Patreons are like, just do a good job for everybody else. I don't want any special content for me. But we will.
But those rewards will not be in-game rewards.
No in-game rewards ever from Talking in Stations. Yeah, they're going to be effort rewards, stuff that we do, or closer rewards. Like, I'm not going to say come hang out with me, or I'm going to follow you on Twitter, or any of that BS. It'll be more if you actually want to hang out behind the scenes, then you become more part of the group that way. I don't know how to do this game. I don't like gamifying stuff, but your support, totally appreciated. Like everybody else's, if you can do it. If you can't, just hang out, be cool, it's fine. Okay.
Yeah, you can also subscribe to us on Twitch if you want to.
Yeah, Twitch and YouTube. Actually, Twitch is blown by YouTube, which is crazy. We have about 7,500 followers here on Twitch. Only 7,200 on YouTube. It used to be the other way around. But those big fights, they bring a lot of new people to Talking in Stations. Wow. Okay, guys. Yeah, swipe left on Matterhall. I don't know how those things work. I was married long before that kind of technology hit the market, unfortunately. All right, guys, take care, and we will see you next time on Talking in Stations.
Grinder and Eve.
Grinder. Oh, here we go.